Rick always says pawn shops were basically the first form of banking, so they've been around for, thousands and thousands of years. But Rick will call in someone that he thinks know the most about it.
Austin Chumley Russell demands answers after what he found in Rick Harrison's Las Vegas estate leaves him questioning everything. "What I discovered in Rick's home will shock fans," Chumley reportedly told close friends. But what exactly did the Pawn Star's sidekick uncover? Chumley, 42, and his wife Olivia, 31, were the first to enter the property after Rick Harrison's extended vacation to Chile with fiancée Angie Polushkin. From the moment they arrived at the affluent Spanish Hills residence, the visit took unexpected turns, conflicting accounts, unusual evidence, and law enforcement involvement that raised more questions than answers. Security did a wellness check and found nothing amiss, but Chumley insisted something wasn't right, a source close to the family revealed. Something inside that house wasn't meant to be found, and now Chumley is demanding the truth. What did investigators keep secret, and why does this case feel far from over? The Discovery and Spanish Hills authorities were called to Rick Harrison's sprawling Spanish Hills mansion on April 9, 2025, after Chumley reported concerns about the property. Located just 15 minutes from the famous gold and silver pawn shop on Las Vegas Boulevard, the luxury residence had been Harrison's sanctuary away from the tourist crowds and cameras. Having been given a key to check on things while Harrison was traveling, Chumley had noticed something unusual during his routine inspection of the home. "I was just supposed to water some plants and make sure everything was okay," Chumley explained. "Rick and Angie were still in South America, celebrating their engagement. I had no idea what I was about to walk into." Upon arrival, Chumley used his key to enter the main residence and quickly determined that something was off. The house appeared undisturbed, with no signs of forced entry, but certain areas seemed deliberately concealed. In Rick's wood-paneled home office, behind a sliding bookcase that Chumley had never seen open before, was an entrance to what appeared to be a hidden room. The scene itself raised immediate concerns. While there were no signs of anything illegal, investigators took note of unusual details inside the hidden chamber. Several items, including rare coins, historical documents, and what appeared to be Civil War-era weapons, were collected as potential evidence. 2 locked safes were also recovered, one of which had been recently accessed, while the other remained sealed. Adding to the confusion, authorities initially reported that the hidden room contained only collectibles and memorabilia. However, conflicting statements later emerged regarding additional items found in a sub-basement beneath the main room. At first, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police claimed that ancient artifacts had been discovered, including potentially illegally imported historical items. Days later, officials clarified that the items were actually high-quality replicas, part of Harrison's private collection of museum-quality reproductions. This misidentification raised further questions about the accuracy of early reports, especially since the History Channel and several Clark County officials had already been notified about the potential discovery. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement officials ruled out any illegal activity or smuggling operation. Tests conducted on the artifacts confirmed they were modern reproductions, though of exceptional quality. Both federal agents and LVMPD officers tested the items, but found no evidence of criminal wrongdoing. Harrison, who had been collecting historical items for decades before his Pawn Stars fame, had apparently amassed an impressive private collection that he kept hidden from public view. Despite his public persona as a straightforward pawnbroker at the gold and silver pawn shop, those close to him had not known about the extent of his personal collections, leading to speculation about why he had kept them so carefully concealed from even his closest family members. His son, Corey "Big Hoss" Harrison, later commented that there had been no indication of these hidden rooms or extensive collections in the family discussions about the property. "Dad never mentioned anything about secret rooms or hidden collections," he reportedly told investigators at the scene, expressing surprise at the discovery. In response to growing speculation, the FBI became involved in the investigation, though their role was not immediately clarified. Officials confirmed that they were assisting local authorities, but declined to provide specifics about their involvement. Neighbors in the exclusive Spanish Hills community reported seeing federal agents at the property for several hours, carefully cataloging items before sealing them in protective containers. Law enforcement officials continued to emphasize that there was no immediate evidence of illegal activity, but inconsistencies in early reports and the unexpected presence of federal agents. fueled public curiosity throughout Las Vegas. As more details emerged, the case only became more complex, leaving many unanswered questions about what had truly been hidden inside the home. The cryptic evidence that raised more questions. In the days following Chumlee's discovery of the hidden rooms in Rick Harrison's Spanish Hills mansion, investigators began piecing together a timeline of the collection's assembly. While the initial assessment ruled out illegal smuggling or theft, certain details inside the hidden chambers did not align with a straightforward explanation. The presence of meticulous documentation, inconsistencies in authentication certificates, and the unexpected involvement of federal authorities raised more questions than answers. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was a leather-bound ledger found in Harrison's hidden office. Investigators noted that the entries appeared routine, cataloging purchases and acquisitions dating back to 2004, well before Pawn Stars made Harrison a household name. The records showed transactions with private collectors, auction houses, and even museums, all seemingly legitimate. However, authorities took particular interest in a series of entries from 2018, the year Richard "Old Man" Harrison passed away. According to sources familiar with the investigation, the ledger contained references to items that had allegedly been part of the elder Harrison's personal collection, items that were never publicly acknowledged in the family's discussions of his estate. Alongside the ledger, investigators discovered documents related to historical artifacts that had briefly appeared at the gold and silver pawn shop before disappearing from public view. These items, which had been featured on early episodes of Pawn Stars, were logged as transferred to private collection, with substantial increases in their appraised values. The safe that had been recently accessed contained several flash drives and external hard drives. Authorities have not released the full details of what was found on these devices, but sources familiar with the case stated that they contained high-resolution images of artifacts from museums around the world, along with detailed notes about their authenticity markers and estimated market values. The presence of such meticulous research materials became a point of scrutiny. Among the items collected were handwritten notes comparing genuine historical artifacts to their reproductions, highlighting methods for identifying key authentication markers. While this kind of research would be normal for a pawnbroker specializing in historical items, the level of detail suggested an expertise far beyond what Harrison had ever demonstrated on television. Investigators also took note of sophisticated humidity and temperature control systems installed in the hidden room, equipment typically used by museums to preserve delicate historical items. The system, which operated independently from the home's main HVAC, had been recently serviced, according to maintenance records found in the room. While initially dismissed as simply the precautions of a serious collector, further examination revealed that the environmental controls were set to museum-grade specifications. Authorities have not stated whether this suggested Harrison was storing genuine historical artifacts requiring such precise preservation, but the professional nature of the setup led to additional analysis. As investigators worked through these inconsistencies, the involvement of federal authorities remained unexplained. Federal agents arrived at the Spanish Hills property within 24 hours of Chumlee's initial report, spending 2 full days inside before leaving with multiple sealed containers. Law enforcement officials stated that the agency was assisting with the investigation but provided no further details on what they had collected. Reports later emerged that agents had taken specific interest in a section of Harrison's documentation that referenced international acquisitions, though officials declined to comment on why those records were examined. Chumlee became increasingly vocal about his doubts regarding the official explanation. While he expressed support for his longtime boss and friend, he also questioned why certain details were not being made public. He specifically raised concerns about the expedited involvement of federal authorities, stating that it didn't make sense for a bunch of reproductions. Chumlee also speculated that the hidden collection might be connected to historical mysteries that had been featured on the show over the years. He pointed out that Harrison had always shown particular interest in Civil War artifacts and colonial-era coins, 2 categories heavily represented in the hidden collection. Despite repeated inquiries from local Las Vegas media, law enforcement and federal authorities remained tight-lipped about the ongoing investigation, without a clear explanation. For the secrecy surrounding the room, speculation continued to grow, fueled by inconsistencies in the evidence and the unusual security measures found within Harrison's home. Investigators maintained that the case remained open but standard, with no criminal elements. However, as days passed, it became increasingly unclear whether all findings would be made public, or if the full extent of Harrison's collection would remain as hidden as the room itself had been for years. The bizarre clues that didn't add up. As investigators continued their examination of Rick Harrison's Spanish Hills home, conflicting details began to emerge that cast doubt on the initial narrative. While authorities maintained that there was no immediate evidence of wrongdoing, inconsistencies in reports and unusual discoveries inside the mansion raised questions that could not be easily dismissed. The situation only became more complicated when certain details were either corrected or withheld entirely from the media and public. One of the most puzzling discrepancies involved the timeline of the hidden room's construction. Initial reports stated that the room had been part of the original home design when Harrison purchased the property in 2019. However, days later, Clark County records revealed that permits for a secure storage area had been filed in early 2022, shortly after Harrison's mother, Joanne, had filed her lawsuit against him over ownership stakes in the gold and silver pawn shop. The timing raised questions about whether the room had been designed to secure assets during the family's legal battle, a theory that gained traction when it was revealed that several items in the collection had been listed as potential marital assets during Harrison's 2019 divorce from his second wife, Suzanne. Beyond the confusion surrounding the room's construction, other findings only deepened the mystery. According to those familiar with Harrison's collecting habits, the hidden collection represented a dramatic departure from his usual interests. While Harrison was known for his expertise in coins, weapons, and American historical items, the hidden collection contained numerous pieces from ancient civilizations, including Egyptian, Greek, and Mesopotamian reproductions of a quality rarely seen outside museums. The expertise required to assemble such a collection seemed at odds with Harrison's public persona. While he had demonstrated knowledge of historical artifacts on Pawn Stars, the depth of research contained in the hidden room's documentation suggested a level of scholarly focus that Harrison had never displayed publicly. This inconsistency led some to speculate that Harrison might have been working with an undisclosed partner or expert who helped curate the collection, a theory that gained credibility when investigators discovered correspondence with several university professors and museum curators among Harrison's papers. The investigation also took an unexpected turn when it was revealed that one of the safes contained detailed floor plans for several major museums, including the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the British Museum in London. Alongside these floor plans were security assessment documents that outlined exhibit rotations, security camera placements, and staff schedules. While possession of such information is not illegal, much of it could be obtained through public sources or research. The comprehensive nature of the files raised eyebrows among investigators. Harrison's authorized representative quickly issued a statement explaining that these documents were research materials for potential future Pawn Stars episodes, focusing on famous museum pieces and their historical significance. The statement emphasized that Harrison had been collaborating with the History Channel on a special series about famous artifacts and their impact on world history. Meanwhile, the presence of federal agents at the crime scene continued to raise speculation. Witnesses reported seeing FBI art crime team members entering and exiting the home multiple times, carrying sealed containers that were later loaded into unmarked vehicles. Authorities refused to disclose what was taken, stating only that the agency was assisting in the case as a precautionary measure. No clarification was given as to why a federal agency specializing in art theft and fraud would be involved if the collection consisted solely of legal reproductions, as officials claimed. This apparent contradiction led to growing frustration among those seeking answers, including Chumley, who had first discovered the hidden room. Further complicating matters, law enforcement officials themselves appeared to struggle with determining the exact contents of the collection. Early reports suggested that several pieces were potentially authentic historical artifacts of significant value. Later statements described them as museum-quality reproductions, indistinguishable from originals without specialized testing. These inconsistencies, whether simple errors in assessment or something more concerning, led to mounting questions about what had actually been found in Harrison's home. The case also took an unexpected turn when it was revealed that security camera footage from the property showed unusual activity in the weeks before Chumley's discovery. The cameras, which covered the exterior of the home but not the hidden room itself, recorded multiple visits from unmarked vehicles during nighttime hours. Investigators have not stated whether these visits were connected to the collection, but they added yet another unexplained element to an already complicated case. Despite mounting speculation, officials remained tight-lipped about any new findings. While authorities maintained that no illegal activity was suspected, the shifting details, specialized security measures, and federal involvement only fueled public curiosity throughout Las Vegas. As more inconsistencies surfaced, one question remained unanswered. Why would Rick Harrison, a man who had built his reputation on transparency and straight dealing, maintain such an elaborate secret collection hidden even from his closest family members and business associates? The secret behind Harrison's private collection. For nearly 2 decades, Rick Harrison had lived a very public life through Pawn Stars, the reality show that turned his family business into a global phenomenon. Yet beneath the familiar persona of the straightforward pawnbroker, Harrison had apparently cultivated a private passion that few knew about, one that extended far beyond the everyday transactions seen on television. While some assumed he simply wanted to keep his personal collecting separate from his business, those who discovered the hidden room noticed subtle signs that suggested a deeper motivation. Harrison had always been known for his disciplined approach to business and collecting. On Pawn Stars, he demonstrated remarkable knowledge about a wide range of historical items, often surprising experts with his ability to spot fakes and determine value. However, locals and longtime associates also noticed that he gradually became more selective about which items he featured on the show versus those he acquired privately. Items that once would have been major features on Pawn Stars began disappearing from public view, sometimes purchased by Harrison himself through third parties or separate business entities. His home itself was another source of intrigue. Unlike the gold and silver pawn shop, which welcomed millions of tourists annually, Harrison's Spanish Hills residence had a number of security features that stood out even in the exclusive neighborhood. Contractors who had worked on renovations over the years described certain requests that seemed excessive: reinforced doors, advanced security systems, and specially designed storage areas with climate control that went far beyond normal home requirements. Some of these modifications weren't merely for comfort or protection. Aerial footage of Harrison's estate revealed a property designed for privacy, with landscaping that obscured sightlines and structures positioned to minimize visibility from neighboring homes. Visitors who had been welcomed into his home in the past noted that certain areas were always off-limits, a restriction that Harrison explained away as just private family spaces. One acquaintance who had known Harrison for decades mentioned that he had shown increasing reluctance to display his most prized personal collections, even to close friends. When asked about this change, Harrison reportedly brushed it off, saying he preferred to keep his best finds to himself rather than have everyone asking about them. Another unusual detail was the extent to which he maintained separation between his public persona and private collecting activities. Even in his later years, when most people would consolidate their interests, Harrison appeared to deliberately compartmentalize different aspects of his life. He rarely allowed crossover between his television world and his private collecting sphere. He kept meticulous records of his acquisitions, but stored them separately from the pawnshop's business documents. Some described this as simple prudence. Others wondered if he was deliberately keeping certain aspects of his collecting habits hidden. Despite his outwardly open nature on television, Harrison maintained tight control over information about his private collection. He rarely allowed photographs inside his home, and when he did host events there, certain rooms remained locked and inaccessible. Some interpreted this as a desire to maintain his privacy after years in the public eye, but others believed he was deliberately concealing the true extent of his collecting activities. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Harrison's hidden collection was its purpose. While some wealthy collectors assemble artifacts for investment or status, the hidden nature of Harrison's collection suggested different motivations. The detailed research materials, comparative analyses, and authentication studies found in the hidden room pointed to someone driven by scholarly interest rather than simple acquisition. Yet Harrison had never publicly expressed such academic inclinations. Contractors working on the property reported that Harrison had approved extensive security modifications to certain areas of the home. work that took place over several months but was never publicly disclosed. When asked about the project, some workers refused to comment, citing non-disclosure agreements. Others mentioned that it was just a secure room for valuable collections, but gave no further details. Despite his advancing age, Harrison continued to handle certain aspects of his collection with extreme caution. Friends who spoke with him in the months before Chumley's discovery said he seemed particularly protective of his privacy, especially regarding his collecting activities. One person who had a conversation with him weeks before the hidden room was found noted that he spoke enthusiastically about new acquisitions, but became evasive when asked where he kept them or how they were displayed. These details raised more questions than answers. While some chalked up his behavior to a collector's natural protectiveness, others suspected that Harrison had been engaged in a more complex project than simply accumulating interesting historical items. The extent of the security measures, the comprehensive documentation, and his increasing secrecy left many wondering what exactly had been happening behind closed doors in his Spanish Hills mansion.